Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange, and the host who has been accused of witchcraft in the past. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature in my travels throughout Salem, Massachusetts. I think you can see what I'm getting at, but just in case I haven't made it clear enough, today I want to talk about a play that I read, a play about accusations of witchcraft and people using confusion and hysteria to gain an upper hand against their town rivals. I am talking about The Crucible by Arthur Miller. It's a pretty standard cover for this book. It's just a scene from one of the plays with people shouting and pointing fingers at one another, which is the entirety of the play, believe it or not. Just people shouting and yelling at one another. So I wanted to talk about The Crucible because it's still Ocpoeber, it's still the spooky month, and this is about witches. Although I also wanted to talk about another play. However, this is interesting because it's not what it seems to be. This is a classic story taught in high schools, and the reason it's taught is because it's actually, an extended metaphor for something that happened to Arthur Miller. Because in the 1950s, the House Un-American Activities Committee got together and decided that they were going to try to out as many communists as possible and give them a hard time so that, people could know who the communists were and give, mainly because this was, the Cold War and people were afraid of Russia, but also, you got the whole, America is founded on capitalism, despite the fact that it wasn't really founded on capitalism. They got together and they accused Arthur Miller, among other people. So a lot of people were blacklisted from the literary or the filmmaking world because they had attended communist meetings in the past. And Arthur Miller was ordered to come before the committee and he had previously made an agreement that he wouldn't have to out other communists. He would simply talk about his experiences and acknowledge that he was a communist. But the person on the committee was like, oh, hey, I want you to tell me who the communists are. And he said no, he wouldn't do that. And so he got charged with contempt of court and a bunch of other things. That was eventually overturned. Good for him. But it shows that how much they really wanted to expose communism in the United States and how they wouldn't accept no for an answer, and you would suffer if you were accused and if you were not accused. Even if you weren't a communist, you could be accused, and you'd have to prove your innocence, and that's very difficult because people were accusing left and right, settling petty grievances and whatnot at times. Eventually, those committee meetings went away, but I don't think the anti-communist sentiment in the United States ever went away. Arthur Miller took this experience and turned it into a story about the Salem Witch Trials, which I feel transfers over pretty well, and we're going to talk about that today. A little summary, a little analysis, and we will move on from there. So the Crucible starts with some unrest going on in the town of Salem. Some children are sick, and a lot of the parents are wondering what could have caused it. They managed to track down Abigail, one of the teenagers in town, and Tituba, a Barbudan slave girl. She comes from Barbados, and they basically say, "We saw you dancing in the forest, and we believe you're in league with the devil. So please tell us who the witches in town are, because we believe that you're all witches." And that has a lot to do with the fact that at the time, the Salem residents believed that the woods were a haven for, mischief and devilry because of the Native Americans. And I touched upon that in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, where the people believed that the woods were filled with, or had been enchanted, at least, by Native Americans or the Dutch, which allowed the ghost to inhabit it. So Abigail and Tituba both try to deny it and assert that they were just simply dancing in the forest. But the parents don't believe them, and they finally manage to pressure Tituba into naming names, and that leads to the other girls naming names of random people throughout Salem who haven't done witchcraft, but they're just naming names at this point, which allows for much of the rest of the plot to go through. And so that's about where Act 1 ends. There's a part where John Proctor talks with Abigail, and you find out that they've had a bit of a relationship in the past, which is difficult because he was married at the time and he had an affair with Abigail over his wife Elizabeth, who still remembers and is very salty, as she should be, about this affair. So the second act begins with John Proctor and his wife Elizabeth talking about what's going on, and they also hover around the issue of his affair with Abigail, and how Abigail might be trying to get back at Elizabeth by accusing her of witchcraft so that she can dance on Elizabeth's grave with John, which John wouldn't do because he clearly doesn't want to be with her, especially if Abigail gets his wife killed. Who's going to want to be with Abigail then? So John's trying to defend himself to his wife, but she doesn't seem to she doesn't seem to believe it too much. Reverend Hale stops by it sometime into this, and he's like, "Hey, your wife. There's been rumblings about your wife, about Elizabeth, how she might be a witch. What's going on there?" And so Reverend Hale questions John, who is a lapsed Christian. He doesn't exactly believe as much as he used to, and the Reverend has many questions about that. But he asserts that the reason he doesn't really go to church is because of the extravagances of the Salem Church Reverend Parish. He has a bunch of golden candles, which he doesn't feel is very in spirit with the religion. And so there's also some of that guilt about his adultery, which isn't very Christian as well. And the act really ends with them coming upon the house and everyone finding out that Abigail has finally accused Elizabeth of witchcraft. And so that's where the second act ends. The third act revolves around the trials. The judges are revealed to be very zealots, essentially. They firmly believe in Christianity, and so it doesn't seem like there's going to be a fair trial because they already believe that there are witches, and you just got to root them out and try hard enough. And it doesn't matter if someone's innocent or not; they're a witch, no matter what you think. But over the course of the trial, a lot of grudges and rivalries are revealed. It seems like people are accusing another person in order to get their land or get back at a grievance that they have with that person. And it doesn't seem to faze the judges who, they don't seem to get that they're causing, a lot of trouble in this town by this kind of sham trial. During the trial, while Elizabeth is there, John confesses to his adultery, but he doesn't outright say it. And Elizabeth refuses to acknowledge it, possibly because of the shame that it will bring to her in this very puritanical society. If there's adultery, if there's an affair, it doesn't look good on Elizabeth as well. So she doesn't acknowledge it too much to John's horror. Why is she holding this back? It could save her life. Abigail accuses Mary, and so Mary's on trial at one point, and it gets to a point where Abigail is pretty much assuring that Mary's going to go to jail because the tricks she's playing make it seem like Mary's a witch. However, it ultimately gets to the point where Mary points the finger at John, is like, you did this to me, you're guilty, you're the devil, you're something like that. So it seems like Abigail is getting what she wants and like breaking up John and Elizabeth. And if she can't do that, she'll at least kill John. So the final act, the fourth act, takes place in prison with John talking with Elizabeth about how things are not going his way. Reverend Hale and Danforth talk, and like Hale's trying to talk Danforth out of hanging John, but Danforth's like, I already hung some people before, it's just to do it again, even though, again, they kind of get the sense that this is a sham trial, and there are no actual witches here. So like they finally go to John Proctor, and they're like, if you confess to your crimes, if you write down that you did witchcraft, we will let you go free. You will not be hung. We just want your confession. And John confesses, but they want him to write it down. And John's like, all I have is my name. If I sign my name to the statement, I have nothing. I blackened my name, I blackened my family's name, and I blackened my friends. All I have left is my name. So he refuses to sign it, and as a result, they hang him. And on that sad, dark note, that's the end of the Crucible. Not a very happy way to go out. So in terms of analysis, the first thing I want to point out is how there are parallels between the Salem Witch Trials and the House Un-American Activities Committee hearings that they did in the 1950s. First and foremost, Arthur Miller draws parallels in that these are both shams. There were no witches in Salem, and like people may have been worshiping the devil. They in my edition, like the introduction, they talk about how the young women may have been very well worshiping Satan, but that's just because young women, young teenagers, they rebel. That's how they were choosing to do it at the time in this puritanical society. So, but that doesn't mean they had any power over anyone. The society was just like very confused about what was happening and was trying to control these young women, and so they engaged in a sham trial. And Abigail took advantage of that and made it even more of a sham. And although there were communists in the United States, none of them were most of them weren't trying to undermine American society. And so by calling them out and getting them blackballed from whatever industry they were in, you were ruining people's lives, much in the way that people's lives got ruined in Salem. So that's a very clear parallel there. And in both stories, you see like the rise of a person who's taking advantage of the situation. And Salem, it's the people who wanted the land. It's people like Abigail who were hoping to gain something from lobbying baseless accusations. And with the House Un-American Activity Committee, it was the senators who wanted to get their name out there in case they ran for higher public office in the future. It was. I don't recall any scenarios where like one communist falsely accused another person who maybe wasn't a communist, but I have no doubt that happened in order for one person to gain a leg up over another. So, Arthur Miller is doing a very good job of drawing those parallels, and since it's the basis of the entire story. Like if that didn't work out, that'd be a huge problem, but it works here. Another thing I want to talk about is the characters. Arthur Miller does a wonderful job of creating these various characters in his story. Reverend Hale is a good character because he realizes too late that that his earnest Christian nature of trying to root out evil wherever he finds it does not turn out how he plans. Somebody uses his good nature against him, and it destroys an entire town. It leaves several people dead, and it's interesting to see that play out in this story. And then you have Elizabeth Proctor, who is very upset about her husband cheating on her, but she refuses to acknowledge it in public because of the shame it could bring to her. And then there's John Proctor, who is just a completely flawed character as a whole. He had an affair with Abigail, and he feels like his wife is making him suffer for it, even though he's acknowledged his wrongs, and he's trying to make amends with God, with his wife, with everyone. I'm going to read a passage to you from that. Spare me. You forget nothing and forgive nothing. Learn charity, woman. I have gone tiptoe in this house all 7 months and she is gone. I have not moved from there to there without, I think, to please you, and still an everlasting funeral marches around your heart. I cannot speak, but I am doubted, every moment judged for lies, as though I come into a court when I come into this house. So, yeah, John Proctor feels a lot of anger and like grief about being held to account for his wife, and I think his wife is more in the right here, just because only she can say when she's forgiven John, and they've entered a marriage, like a very, especially in a puritanical society where marriage is forever, and it seems he broke that bond. So there's a lot going on there, and it shows that he's he wants to be forgiven, but it's not coming to him. Another thing about John is that he's losing his religious faith. Prior to the start of this story, it seems he doesn't go to church as much. He hasn't gotten his third child baptized. A lot of this seems to stem from the fact that he doesn't like Reverend Parrish, as Parrish seems to represent the church's extravagances of having gold and not really giving back to the poorer in society. And I think he wants to tell Reverend Hale this, but he doesn't quite have the words to say it. And if he does say it, it'll just make him look more like a witch, or in league with Satan, in Reverend Hale's eyes and in the eyes of the court. And then at the end of the story, he's unable to falsely confess, because as he notes, he only has his name. And so there's a lot of ego and pride going on that results in him just not being able to even lie and say, hey, I was in league with the devil, I'm ready to sign away my name. And I would argue that that's fine. It's okay that he didn't want to sign away his name. I wouldn't have wanted to do it, even though it would have set me free. So his last defiant act is sticking true to himself, and acknowledging that he's a flawed person. He may not be the most Christian man, but he's going to stand true before a sham court in his eyes. I would say the only thing I didn't like about this story is how it seems to rewrite history. Throughout history, women have been accused of being witches, and the entire witchcraft accusation circuit was mainly an exercise in misogyny, as any time a woman showed any sense of independence, like she's a witch, we got to kill her, let's be done with it. But this story seems to rewrite it, and it tries to make John Proctor seem like the victim, especially of a woman who has a grudge to settle with him. Abigail only cares about ruining John's life, and in that way she kind of comes off as a bit, kind of one-dimensional in that regard. So I don't like that Arthur Miller tries to rewrite history and make men seem like the victims here. But I can't really do anything about that now, especially because Arthur Miller is dead. But it should be noted that when you read it, you should remember that kind of thing. Anyway, that was The Crucible by Arthur Miller, a book that a play that I strongly recommend because of the insight it gives to humanity and the parallels he draws with modern society. This happened before, and it can happen again, and we should all really be thinking about that, so that people with grudges to settle don't take control of the narrative and falsely accuse other people of crimes they did not commit. If you have anything to say about this, if you read this before, or you want to say something about my review, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you. We can have a conversation about witches and Salem and communism. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that we can get the message of Salem out to the masses. The message of Arthur Miller, noted playwright and good author. Otherwise, don't forget to follow me on Twitter @AroundTheWeird, as I talk about pop culture and books and all kinds of fun things that you might be interested if you like this video. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and false accusation-y travels. Farewell.